Hello and welcome to episode 131 of Glitch Report. My name is GnittWitt. Thank you so much for stopping by, saying hi, kicking it with me today on the stream. The stream of dreams, the show of shows, and everything in between. And while you are with me today, make sure to head on over to linktree.com/GnittWitt, GnittWitt. I am all over the internet and you can find all the stuff that I do over there while you're here with me listening and hanging out for the show. We got a good show for you today. We got a decent amount of news. I don't know if you heard PSN was down. It's back up. We'll talk about that. Grand Theft Auto 6 might be coming out this year. We'll talk that. We have unfortunately a handful of video game layoffs to discuss as well. And I have made more progress in Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, which we will talk about later on in the show. But let's get into this here right now. If I feel snappy, if I feel a sense of urge, a need for speed, I do have a medical appointment later on today. So I want to make sure I get this done before I go and get that done. So let's talk about PSN. PSN was down. It is now back online. So you know, just in case you were worried about it, PSN was down. Let me try to pull up some details surrounding this. No, I don't want that. I want this. This is what I want. So PSN was down sometime last week after the show had already been recorded. It was down on Friday. So here's what I have. I have the official PlayStation support Twitter account that said at 5:46 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, we are aware some users might be currently experiencing issues with PSN. Like I said, that was 5:46 p.m. on February the 7th. And it ended up being down for about 24 hours, roughly. Now, keep in mind that with PSN being down, a lot of things impact people's ability to play games. Your digital games need to have authenticated ownership. So if you don't have a good internet connection, or if you can't connect to the server that you're trying to communicate with, it is very difficult, nigh impossible, to be able to, connect people to their digital owned games. So keep in mind that I'm getting this from Video Games Chronicles. As always, shout out to Video Games Chronicles. There's no explanation for what caused this. There is currently no notice of hey, we were hacked, or hey, someone tripped over a power cable, or someone spilled coffee on a server. There's nothing to note. But I want to reference this from Video Games Chronicles. While online services outages are fairly common, one larger issue arising from this PSN outage is that due to the way game licenses are handled on the platform, players with digital copies of their games have found that they are unable to play their games. While some digital titles will launch, PlayStation will then warn players that the game will close after 15 minutes due to being unable to verify the license for the game. You'd think that you'd be able to authenticate it, a little less frequently, perhaps on a 24-hour basis, on a weekly basis, on a monthly basis, on a yearly basis, right? Also, I don't know how ownership of PSN games work, that you only have 15 minutes to play a game offline, even if you bought it and owned it. I know that you can, I guess technically you could always have somebody sign in to their PSN on your account and then download games that you play on your PSN, on your PlayStation, because there's the PlayStation profile. I don't have a PS5. Doesn't matter. There's the PS5 account level stuff, and then there's the PSN account level stuff. And I just don't know where the mix-up is that's preventing people from doing that. But unfortunately, if you have bad internet, or you have, even if you downloaded a game, if you don't have access to the PSN, you're not going to be able to play those games. So that is the problem that a lot of people ran into during that 24-hour period on Costa, on top of course, not being able to play online games, Destiny 2 or Fortnite or Call of Duty or things like that. It is back up, and Sony is apologizing. The make good is 5 days of PS Plus, whatever your tier was, you're just going to get additional PS Plus, which I've been thinking a lot about PS Plus recently. Again, as someone who doesn't have a PS5, I don't know why I would spend all this time thinking about PSN, but I was talking to a family member who has PSN, and they have the tiers, and they know all about it, and they do all that stuff. And the real thing for me is that PSN seems like a fucking mess. And I'm not even talking about the ability for their servers to go offline and stuff like that. I'm just talking about like how you access the things you have, what is part of the premium tier, what's part of the extra tier, what's part of the basic tier, what's the difference between a game that you got from the extra tier versus a game that you got as one of the free monthly games. Like if you, for example, like I think this month you get Payday 3, High on Life, and Pac-Man Repack. And I don't know if any of those games ever made it to PS Plus extra tier, but if they didn't, how would you know the difference between that and say God of War Ragnarok that you got from the extra tier? Like it's just real confusing. I don't even know if God of War is part of the extra tier, so excuse me for being ignorant, but man, oh man, there are so many things that you could clean up with PSN that would make a huge difference. And I don't often mean to compare apples to oranges, but say what you will about Game Pass. Game Pass has 2 tiers, right? Basically 2 tiers. It has the standard tier, which means you're going to get like 25 games. Maybe they rotate a little bit, maybe they don't. That's it, right? Then you also have the ultimate tier, which is everything else under the sun, plus your day one games. And when a game goes, it goes. It's not like it goes to a separate library or it goes to some fucking like, I feel like I'm almost describing like, you know, the way parents talk about their child's Animal Passing, like, oh, your copy of you know, Horizon Forbidden West went to a farm up in upstate Vermont, right? And we're not going to be able to see it anymore, but it's there. Don't worry, your copy of fucking God of War Ragnarok, it's in a nice farm in Connecticut. Don't worry about it. Like, man, what the fuck sort of weird shit is going on with PSN and the way they present that stuff. Now, in fairness, it has only gotten worse as they've introduced these other tiers. You know, when I look at my PSN account now, all the things that have like the lock icon and all of that shit are games that I got as part of the free monthly, which means if I resubscribe, I'd get those back. And if I ever did that again, but regardless of it being down, they got to fix PSN. Like, please save PSN. Because it has been a real mess for quite some time, regardless of when it goes down. Grand Theft Auto 6. Let's talk Grand Theft Auto 6. Grand Theft Auto 6 is reportedly on track to come out this fall of the year 2025. That is currently the plans, according to Rockstar parent company Take-Two Interactive. There are currently no plans to delay the game. Now, the other thing to note is that this game will probably not be coming out on PC, at least at launch. According to Take-Two, you know, their forecast calendar year 2025, they're looking at games like Civilization 7, which is out now, Mafia: The Old Country, which is coming out in the summertime, Borderlands 4, which doesn't have a date, and Grand Theft Auto 6, which also doesn't have a date. Now, there are, we've talked about this before, other publishers, other game companies trying to get out of the way of Grand Theft Auto 6. I am wondering if it's a scenario where Rockstar knows and Take-Two knows that they could put this out early. They could put it out late. They could announce a date, you know, a long time from now. They could announce a date, you know, 6 weeks before release. It's really hard to say. It is hard to say, but they're still saying, hey, we're on track to put this out in the fall. Just don't know when just yet. Let's talk about some of those game industry layoffs that I kind of alluded to up at the start. Killer Instinct Studio Iron Galaxy has laid off 66 employees. They're also the makers of Rumbleverse, and said that their job cuts are a last resort measure to enable long-term growth. This is a Chicago-based indie studio that made Rumbleverse. They also do various ports. So, for example, they've you know, are kind of like mercenaries to some extent. So, you know, Killer Instinct made by them. Rumbleverse made by them, but they've also worked on games like Call of Duty, The Last of Us, Uncharted, Elder Scrolls, Fallout, Destiny, BioShock. I remember Iron Galaxy worked on, I believe, The Last of Us Part 1 PC port, as well as the Uncharted PC port. Now, reportedly employed more than 250 people in March of 2022, when it said it planned to hire over 100 more people for the opening of its third studio. Following several years of making sacrifices to keep the teams intact, Iron Galaxy said in a LinkedIn update that it had run out of room to maneuver. In total, we have reduced our employee base by 66 people. This was a means of last resort for us. It's a measure we do not take lightly to enable our long-term survival. Iron Galaxy is still committed to serving our partners in the creation of games. Our capabilities remain intact to work with the best companies in the world on the most beloved player experiences. This year, we'll continue to explore new ways to support an industry we love and keep working towards its ongoing recovery. At this moment, our focus is on our teammates who have begun a journey towards their next role. We thank them for working with us. We'll be doing everything we can to support them in the search of the next phase of their careers. Keep an eye out for them if you need good people. We are sorry to see them go. Now, over 1 in 10 developers who participated in a recent Game Developers Conference survey said that they were laid off over the past year. Another thing to note, and I believe this was, you're going to have to go listen to, if you want to know more, the Jeff Gersman episode that has Adam Boyes on. Adam Boyes, formerly of Sony, formerly of Iron Galaxy, said that, I believe it was him who mentioned that a lot of people that, get laid off from the games industry, a lot of people that get laid off, don't stick around. They don't wait around to find another job. They don't want to deal with the ambiguity, deal with the pressure, deal with the, this very fickle industry. So you unfortunately see a lot of people who just don't stick around in the industry, after they have been let go, which is incredibly unfortunate. Of course, everyone at Iron Galaxy, I wish them the best of luck. I think Killer Instinct's a great game. I know Rumbleverse did not do it, but it seemed like a neat game nonetheless. And of course, I hope everybody lands on their feet. This is a tough one from a great studio who does a lot of great work in terms of original work, but also helping out as a support studio for a lot of different studios. Which means if we think about a smaller studio like Iron Galaxy for just a moment, and then we think about a studio like Bungie struggling, if we think about a studio like Ubisoft's, different organizations struggling, there's not a lot of room for a smaller support studio like Iron Galaxy to exist in this current landscape when the big dogs are struggling as it is. So, if it was a scenario where Iron Galaxy had an original game that was out there, doing it for them, that'd be one thing. And I'm not here to blame them on Rumbleverse or how any of their stuff has necessarily gone. Like, I don't know how this situation ended up being this way for them, but what does Iron Galaxy have to offer a studio like, Destiny developer Bungie, when Bungie was struggling with the people that they had? So they probably didn't have money to hire outside talent, to hire mercenaries, to do all this other stuff, which is why we kind of see a situation where even smaller and medium-sized companies like Iron Galaxy are getting squeezed as part of the current situation going on in the games industry. But it's not just in Chicago where Iron Galaxy is. It's not just in North America. It's also happening in Japan. Bandai Namco has reportedly reduced its Japanese workforce by over 100 people. Bandai Namco has lost over 100 developers since their high-profile cancellations from last year. This is according to Automaton. A filing on Japanese Online's pension database shows that between April 2024 and February 2025, 117 staff have left the company. This doesn't clarify if those left the company voluntarily or if they were let go. It's just reduced staff. There's a difference between laying people off like Iron Galaxy did and finding a way to let people go or let themselves go or whatever, as Bandai Namco did. Now, last year, Bloomberg reported that the company was taking a traditionally Japanese approach to reducing staff and sending workers to rooms where they were given nothing to do, putting pressure on them to leave voluntarily. It was alleged that the company was engaging in the practices of Odashi Beya, a method used by Japanese corporations to isolate employees by giving them no tasks in an effort to get them to leave of their own volition rather than be let go and receive severance. It was claimed in the same report last year that Bandai has ceased production on several titles, including games featuring the One Piece and Naruto licenses, as well as a contract project with Nintendo. However, Bandai Namco's latest release, Dragon Ball Sparking Zero, has seen strong sales. The game, developed by Spike Chunsoft, surpassed a total of 5 million units sold worldwide since launch, according to the publisher. As always, I wish everyone the best of luck landing on their feet as they leave Bandai Namco. Now let's talk about early access for a moment. You may not play a lot of early access games. I certainly do not play as many early access games as I used to. One of the reasons for that is because, I would rather you only get one chance to make a first impression, right? So for me to get into an early access game and be like, oh, this game is neat, but it's not done. I might not ever get around to that game once it is done, because I feel like I kind of saw what the initial promise of it was. And I got to be honest, I just don't have the patience to stick around to see if a game is going to make a promise, right? If it's going to keep that promise necessarily. But one of the other things to note is that, with these early access games, some of them just never see the updates. There are plenty of early access games. In fact, I would argue most of the early access games that I have played eventually came out in a full release and maybe continued to receive support after release and whatnot. But some get abandoned. And now what Steam is doing as part of its efforts to better, prepare customers, is Steam has added a warning for abandoned early access titles. Steam will now tell players if a game hasn't been updated in over a year. So according to Steam database, an example warning reads, note, the last update made by the developer was over 13 months ago. The information in the timeline described by the developers here may no longer be up to date. It appears that this warning will appear on games that haven't received an update in over a year. Several early access titles such as Hades 2 don't sport this warning because they're constantly receiving updates. Similarly, much older early access games seem to be exempt from this warning. If I go to Steam right now, there's a game that I have been playing off and on for some time now that is an early access game. It's been in early access for a really long time, but it continues to receive updates. And the reason why I'm going to reference this game, if I can find it, here it is because of I just want to break down kind of what you see as part of early access. So the game I'm referencing is Maximum Action. Maximum Action is a first-person shooter, and it is an early access. And basically, there are a couple questions that Steam asks these early access games. And here's what the developer said. So the first question they ask is, why early access? And they say, the core of Maximum Action is based around excellent FPS experience and satisfying shooting. It's extremely important to me that the community has a say in what aspect of the game promote this goal. Early access perfectly satisfies this requirement, as it allows for Maximum Action to quickly and conveniently adapt new features and killer ideas. And then they say, approximately how long will this game be in early access? To which they say, until it's the most maximally actionable game on the planet. Keep in mind that Maximum Action originally came out in early access in September 19th of 2018. Then the next question is, how will the full version planned to differ from the early access version? To which they say the full version of Maximum Action will include more levels, more weapons, more enemies, and more user customization. The other question that they ask is, what is the current state of the early access version? What will the game be priced differently during and after early access? And how are you planning on involving the community in your development process? Now, in fairness, they are continuing to work on Maximum Action. In fact, they just put out some updates for controller support that I'm really curious to check out. But they don't have this warning saying that the game is abandoned. They don't have that. I'd have to probably go look and see if I can find an abandoned early access game to even show you kind of what that warning looks like. Is there early access? Yeah, show me early access games. See, I imagine games that are featured on the front page of Steam are not going to be, abandoned early access games. I bet I'm going to have to start digging for some bullshit to see what I find. Now, in fairness, this is very easy to abuse, right? Think about this. All they're saying is that the game has to have not received an update in a year. Well, there are very easy ways to put out a little thing here and there to string people along and all of that stuff. So I don't know if this is something that's going to eventually change to be like, hey, this game has not received significant updates in this amount of time. It's received a little bit of updates here and there. I don't know. But keep in mind that Steam does offer one of the most robust refund systems on any of the gaming's large digital marketplaces. There's currently no refund system in place for a game that is abandoned midway through development. So keep that in mind. If you spent $20-$30 on an early access game and 6 years later it's not out, like that's on you, player. However, Steam will allow no questions asked refunds on any game on the platform as long as the game hasn't been played for more than 2 hours. Full refunds may be offered in other in other exceptional circumstances, such as high-profile performance issues. Since the program's inception, Steam has warned players that games in early access are not complete and may or may not change further. If you are not excited to play this game in its current state, then you should wait to see if the game progresses further in development. And that's, of course, not taking into account high-profile games that come out day one and are broken and busted and receive significant updates over time, like Cyberpunk. Cyberpunk was not a game that entered early access in a traditional sense of something like Maximum Action or Hades or Hades 2. We got a little bit of leaks. Well, it's really one leak, but I guess a singular thing. Well, let me read the headline. I guess grammatically this makes sense. Metal Gear Solid Delta Snake Eater release date leaks via PSN. The game is reportedly coming out August 28th, and the game will be PS5 Pro enhanced. They also put out a trailer for the game. The trailer shows that Snake versus Monkey mode from the original game will return. Don't ask me what Snake versus Monkey mode is. I don't remember. But, hey, it's coming out sooner rather than later. Now let's talk about a game that's not coming out anytime soon. Did you know that there was a Wonder Woman game being made over at DC? This is being made by Monolith Productions. Monolith Productions, also the Fear people, to name some of the stuff that they've worked on. The Wonder Woman game has reportedly been rebooted and is years away. Wonder Woman, which is being developed by Monolith Productions, will use the Nemesis system from their acclaimed Lord of the Rings games, Lord of the Rings, Middle-earth Shadow of War, and Middle-earth Shadow of Mordor. Those are the most recent games that Monolith has made. The game was announced back in 2021 at the Game Awards, but since then, nothing has been shown from the project. Now, according to Bloomberg, the project was rebooted last year and has switched directors. One of the company's biggest bets in development, a video game based on Wonder Woman, has struggled to coalesce according to people familiar with the project. Early last year, it was rebooted and switched directors. The game has already cost more than $100 million to make, and said people who asked not to be identified discussing non-public information, and is still years away from release if it ever makes it to market. Now, elsewhere in the report, it claimed that both Harry Potter Quidditch Champions and Multiverses flopped. As you remember, we talked about Multiverses just last week, but apparently Harry Potter Quidditch Champions also flopped. Remember, that was also the game that came out day one for free as part of the PlayStation Plus release. I'm sure they got a little bit of money from Sony as part of that deal, but I guess nobody else went and bought it as a result. Now, the other thing to note is, Harry Potter Quidditch Champions flopped, Multiverses flopped. They're having a hard time getting Wonder Woman out the door. The other thing to note is that Rocksteady Studios, the people that made the Batman Arkham trilogy, that's Asylum, that's City, and that's Night. These are also the same people that made Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League. They're reportedly going back to the well and working on a single-player Batman game, though it will probably take a while to come out. This is, of course, according to Bloomberg. when they were talking about, Warner Brothers and Wonder Woman. They said that Rocksteady is looking to return to Batman for a single player game, but according to people familiar with the timeline, the new project is years away from landing. Rocksteady Studios suffered layoffs earlier this year, marking the second time in recent months the company had undergone job losses. It was reported last September that numerous Rocksteady employees had been made redundant over the previous month, according to its QA department being more than halved from 33 staff to 15. Now, again, in fairness, if they are this early on in a Batman game, there may not be a lot of QA and testing needed for a game that is this raw, for lack of a better word. As the latest title from the studio behind the celebrated Batman Arkham franchise, Suicide Squad was once one of the industry's most highly anticipated games, but enthusiasm for it seemingly waned during a protracted development cycle, which included some underwhelming pre-release showings and a backlash to its live service elements. And if you remember, Warner Brothers took a $200 million loss on the game. So if and when we see that Wonder Woman game, it'll feature elements of a Nemesis system that we really haven't seen in a very, very long time. The last game to feature the Nemesis system was Middle-earth: Shadow of War. And then, who knows, right? Like, people were talking for the longest time that Warner Brothers was actually potentially looking at getting out of the video game industry entirely and selling off their game developers and gaming properties. This is why you saw the last, so you might have, if you're familiar with the cycle of development over at NetherRealm, over the last couple of years, they have done Mortal Kombat game, then they do an Injustice game. Injustice, of course, being based off DC characters. And then they do a Mortal Kombat game, and then they do a Injustice game, again, based off the DC characters. But they have doubled down over the last development cycle to make 2 Mortal Kombat games back to back. And rumors were one of the reasons that they did that is because they weren't sure if they were going to get sold off by Warner Brothers and then lose the access and the licensing to those DC characters, which is why you saw them double down with Mortal Kombat 1. Mortal Kombat 1, unfortunately, a game that did not seem to set the world on fire compared to Mortal Kombat X and Mortal Kombat 11. So there is the chance that you might see another Mortal Kombat game from them if Warner Brothers truly, if David Zaslav wakes up one day and says, fuck it, I got to get out of the games industry, man, fuck all this shit, then, who knows if and when we'll get another Batman game, let alone that, that Wonder Woman game. And it probably means that NetherRealm will be stuck with making Mortal Kombat games until the end of time, which in fairness, they do a great job. It's just that Mortal Kombat 1 game was not so hot. Another game that is on hold is Crysis 4. Crysis 4 is currently on hold over at Crytek. Its director has left, and Crytek is laying off 15% of its staff. The company says it has to make cuts to remain financially sustainable. This is a statement that, so 15% of the staff, for context, 15% of the staff is around 60 people over at Crytek. All right. In a statement posted on its official Twitter account, the company said the layoffs were necessary because of the current state of the industry. Quote, like so many of our peers, we aren't immune to the complex, unfavorable market dynamics that have hit our industry these past several years. It pains us greatly to share today that we must lay off an estimated 15% of our around 400 employees. The layoffs affect development teams and shared services. This has not been an easy decision to make, as we deeply appreciate the hard work of our talented teams. Now, Crytek's announcement also reveals that it decided during Q3 of last year to put development of Crysis 4 on hold so that it can shift developers over to Hunt Showdown 1896. Hunt Showdown is their multiplayer shooter live service game, which seems to actually be doing quite well for Crytek. Now, Crytek announced in January of 2022 that a 4th Crysis game was in development, and later that year had recruited the Hitman 3 game director Matthias Engstrom to lead development of the game. Now, Engstrom's LinkedIn page showed that he left Crytek in November of 2024, presumably after Crysis 4 development was put on hold, and he rejoined Hitman Studio IO Interactive as a principal game designer. In its statement, the studio added, while Hunt Showdown 1896 is still growing, Crytek can't continue as before and remain financially sustainable. Even after ongoing efforts to reduce costs and cut operation expenses, we have determined that layoffs are inevitable. To move forward, Crytek will offer affected employees severance packages and career assistance services. Stating that it firmly believes in the future of Crytek, the company says the plan is to now continue to expand and evolve Hunt Showdown 1896 with great content and drive our strategy of our Cry engine. If you've heard me talk about things like Unreal Engine and Unity Engine, CryEngine is also an engine that is available for people to use. I believe Crytek still licenses is out for people that want to get their hands on it. I've never played Hunt Showdown 1896. It's $30, 40 bucks, excuse me. They also sell different characters. I'm looking at this game now on Steam. Oh, isn't this that fucking game with what's his name? Isn't this the game that has Mr. Face Tattoos? You know Mr. Face Tattoos. What the hell is the face tattoo guy called? Oh, isn't this the game with Post Malone in it? I could be wrong, but I want to say this is the game with Post Malone in it. Oh, what the hell do I know? I'm going to close this page and move on to our final news story. Alan Wake 2 has officially sold more than 2 million copies. Remedy is now starting to make royalties from the game. They were not making royalties before because of the deal that they had with Epic Games, who helped publish it. But you might be wondering, GnittWitt, what is going on over at Remedy? And are they making new games? Well, let's talk about it. Here's what we have from our good folks over at Remedy. In a financial statement summarizing the company's results for the fourth quarter of 2024, Remedy says the game has passed the 2 million milestone by the end of the year. Remedy says it's now starting to make royalties on the game because it's now paid off development and marketing costs involved in its making. The statement says Alan Wake 2's sales exceed 2 million units during the quarter. By the end of 2024, Alan Wake 2 has recouped its development fees and marketing investments, meaning that Remedy started to accrue royalties towards the end of the quarter. Elsewhere in this report, Remedy notes that Control 2 entered full production this month, joining its other titles FBC Firebreak and Max Payne 1 and 2 Remake, which entered full production earlier. Now, Control is being co-financed by Annapurna Pictures, which Remedy says makes it able to make Control 2 exactly the game we want it to be. As part of the deal, Annapurna will also be bringing Remedy IP, including Control and Alan Wake, to film, TV, and beyond, but Control 2 publishing will still be handled by Remedy, despite Annapurna having a game publishing arm. This marks the news Annapurna Pictures funding for Control 2, followed by a mass resignation at its gaming publishing division of Annapurna Interactive, which saw the entire workforce quit. Remedy Communications Director Thomas Pua then posted to Twitter that the mass resignation wouldn't affect its Control deal because they made that deal with Annapurna Pictures themselves. So hey, turns out Remedy's got a lot of irons in the fire. They're working on Control 2. They're working on FBC Firebreak. I believe FBC Firebreak will be the next game that they put out. So I'm going to assume it's FBC Firebreak, which is that multiplayer Control game. Then it's going to be that Max Payne 1 and 2 remake. And then it'll be Control 2. So they got a lot of irons in the fire. I'm very curious to see if, I mean, it's way too early to say this, but like, is Alan Wake 3 the next game after Control 2? It'll be a while before we find out. All right, we're going to take our first and only break of the episode today. I told you this is going to be a shorter episode. I'm going to take a quick break, and we're going to come back and talk about the games that I've been playing. Stick around. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the podcast. I continue to be GnittWitt. One thing I wanted to mention before we go talking about the games that I've been playing is that Sony is going to be having their State of Play today. That is Wednesday at 2 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. So if you're wondering, GnittWitt, you really were like cooking through the news and all of that stuff. It's because really the biggest news is not going to happen until after I'm done recording the show, which means we're going to talk about it next week on the podcast, probably at the start of the show. So go watch that State of Play. I'll be watching that State of Play if you get the chance to do so. But to be honest, I'm not going to get a chance to talk about that today because I have to go do things, unfortunately, and it's not happening until 2 p.m. But let's talk about the games that I've been playing, or should I say game that I've been playing. I have been continuing to play through Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. Last we spoke, I said that I have not had as much of a chance to play the game. I have corrected myself right now. I'm probably about 16 or so hours into Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. I think I'm on chapter 6 of 16. I think it doesn't matter what chapter I'm on. I'll tell you this. I'm not going to spoil the game because I know that they changed things about the story from the original Final Fantasy VII to Remake and Rebirth. But I can tell you that last night I made it to Costa del Sol, which is the third open world region of Final Fantasy VII Remake. This region of the game is a tropical paradise filled with all sorts of mini games and distractions and things like that. It does not seem like a part of the world where you're doing a lot of fighting, running around, doing monster related side quests and activities. This seems like, hey man, do you want to play like a gallery shooting game? Do you want to play cards? Do you want to ride around on segways? Do you want to go to the beach? Do you want to play the piano? A lot of different side activities and distractions. And I want to say this now because I would love to be wrong later, but I think I have an idea of where Final Fantasy is kind of going with all this. One of the problems that I had with Final Fantasy 16 is there were so many hard swings from the pace of the story, from, oh my God, we just did this like crazy, big bad boss battle, to, hey, now I'm meeting somebody who has some total random bullshit for me to do that I can't skip and have to complete as part of the main story. And I really feel like that just broke up so much of this stuttery mess of a pace that was the Final Fantasy 16 story. Despite enjoying the gameplay and despite enjoying some elements of the story, I really found it hard to be invested in the characters and what they were doing and who they were helping. Now, a lot of that stuff, to some extent, exists in Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. I am not going to sit here and lie and tell you that after some big climactic moment, there isn't some seemingly silly side quest related activity that gets put in front of you and presented as part of the main story. However, maybe it is my nostalgic feelings for the Cloud, characters like Cloud and Tifa and Barret and Yuffie and Red and Aerith and all that stuff, but their reaction to some of the side quest activities that are presented to you and some of the main plot stuff has been fun enough that I don't find it breaks up the pace as much. Like when someone says to Clive in Final Fantasy 16, hey, can you help me go find this missing person? And Clive's like, yeah, okay. It just feels like even Clive is going through the motions in some way, shape, or form, doing that stuff in Final Fantasy 16. And I don't feel like that is as obvious and as present in Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. I feel like the characters in Rebirth, considering you're rolling with a much larger, in Final Fantasy 16, it's really just like Clive and a couple other characters. It's a small group of characters that are really leading the story. Whereas in Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, you have Cloud, you have Tifa, you have Barret, you have Aerith, you have Red 13, and you have Yuffie as part of that story. So there's usually one or two people in that story who are very game to help and participate in whatever comes next as part of the main story. And I feel like that encourages me to be more engaged in the story as I progress. So this idea that like, oh, in order to make it to the beach in Costa del Sol, you have to play as Cloud and Barrett and do mini games where you are walking the boardwalk of this fancy tropical paradise looking for side quests to do. And then you have to do the same thing over again as Tifa and Aerith, but it's different side quests. It feels like kind of a boys' night out, girls' night out sort of experience that I feel like makes sense in the context of, well, these characters just came through a really crazy moment in the story, so they kind of have earned something of a vacation. And you know, I'm more than happy to admit if I'm wrong, you know, 20 hours later from now, 30 hours later from now. But I find that by avoiding some of the pure side content in the game and just focusing on the story and what is presented as part of the story, I'm enjoying Final Fantasy VII Rebirth a lot more than maybe I was even last we spoke. Like, I'm very excited to see where that story goes and how the characters feel about the things that are changing and stuff like that. I'm playing the game on the easiest difficulty. I don't find the difficulty to be too hard at all. It also doesn't seem like a game where you need to grind out a lot of fights and stuff like that to upgrade your characters. I mean, you certainly can. The more side content you do, the stronger you're going to be, the better weapons you're going to find, the better upgrades you're going to have for those weapons and your abilities and your skill tree systems and all that stuff. And, you know, I'm at a point in the game where I can't really go back to the other open world areas. So what I've done. So I'm sure I'll be able to go back to and clean up some of the other side quests that I haven't done just yet in some of the other open worlds. But I think I'm on open world area 3, and I think there's like 7 or so in the game. So or maybe more, maybe less. So I have a ways to go. Like, I'm still, if I'm guessing, after, you know, 16 or so hours in Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, I'm maybe a quarter of the way through it, maybe a third, but I'm enjoying it. I feel like for people who, you know, are looking to get into Final Fantasy in general, yes, there is fun to be had with Final Fantasy 16. I just find that the story is so rotten with filler in a way that I just don't feel like is nearly as big of a problem in Final Fantasy VII. It is there. It is prominent. It is between them re-editing the story from the original Final Fantasy to make segments longer and more dramatic, to the side quests of like, oh, walk the boulevard and ride these chocobos and do all this other stuff. Like, there's plenty of that stuff in the game. I just don't feel it to be as annoying as it was in Final Fantasy 16. So if you get the chance to play a Final Fantasy game, I would probably still recommend Final Fantasy VII Remake, even if you don't end up going through Rebirth and whatever the third game is. I think the game is decent. There's some fun to be had, especially the DLC, which has Yuffie. Yuffie is introduced in Final Fantasy VII Intermission, I believe the DLC is called. But Cloud, Barrett, and Tifa are part of Final Fantasy, just the base Final Fantasy VII game. I know there's other characters to meet. I know there's other places to go. I know the Golden Saucer is in Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. I have not made it to the Golden Saucer just yet, but I'm looking forward to it. I'm also pretty close to wrapping up Chapter 6 in Rebirth, if I had to guess. So let me just confirm with you right now. How many chapters? 7 Rebirth. I think it's 16. Oh, excuse me. I lied. It's 14, a prologue, and then you can go back and do the open world stuff if you want. So I'm almost done. Chapter 6. I'm very, very close to being done Chapter 6, but I'm enjoying it. But here's the thing. Next time we talk on this podcast, I will not just be talking about Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. I will probably have had a chance to play at least a little bit of Avowed, which is coming out on the 18th. Early access for people is starting on Saturday. I will not be participating in the early access version of Avowed, but I will be playing it. That game is out on the 18th. I am very, very, very excited about Avowed. Looking forward to it, hoping it's good. But because it comes out on a Tuesday, I typically tend to work on Tuesdays. And because we do the show on, Wednesday morning, the likelihood that I'm going to be immediately able to like tell you everything I know about Avowed and all that stuff That's not going to happen. We will most likely have a review roundup for Avowed. I think that would make the most sense. I don't know when reviews for Avowed are going to come up, but when they do, I'm sure we'll talk about it. That game looks dope, and that's going to be coming out on the 18th, and it is 3 days early as part of the early access program. And of course, we'll talk about the PlayStation State of Play and all of that stuff next week as well. This has been a short episode of the podcast, but I hope you have enjoyed it. I enjoyed making it. I hope you enjoyed listening to it, hanging out with me. My name is GnittWitt, and you can find everything that I do over at my Linktree. That is linktree.com/GnittWitt, GnittWitt. I am on TikTok. I am on Threads. I am on Instagram. I am on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. That is going to do it for Glitch Report. We'll see you all next week. Take it easy.